American automobiles dominated the streets for many years. Purchasing domestic was more than simply common from the 1930s to the 1960s. It was a source of pride. The majority of families kept with the same brand for the rest of their lives since there were so many options. The fashion was striking, and the brand was dependable. Then, however, something altered. When the 1970s arrived, the American car industry abruptly changed. Engineering quick cuts, hasty emissions repairs, poor cost cutting, and a few vehicles with such serious flaws that they not only let owners down but also encouraged millions of Americans to switch to imports for good. These are the vehicles that failed on a cultural level, in addition to a mechanical one. They ruined resale prices, ruined reputations, and produced the type of negative publicity that endures for decades. We're dissecting the top 5 worst American automobiles ever made today. The cars that genuinely altered Americans' perceptions of their own automakers. You'll see just how severe the damage was at the end, I promise. Let's begin with number 5. Fifth, Chrysler Rod vehicles from 1979. In late 1970s, Chrysler needed a hit. Rather, the RB body lineup was released. The Dodge St. Regis, the Newport, the New Yorker, and the fleeting Plymouth Grand Fury. In theory, they were compact, full-size automobiles designed to rival Ford and GM. They were, in fact, outdated concepts wearing new badges, an old-fashioned platform. Chrysler ran out of money by 1979. Not on a strict budget, but looking through the couch cushions was expensive. Rather than creating a contemporary platform, they warmed up a B-body chassis from the early 1960s and dubbed it new. When purchasers demanded something new, that meant antiquated suspension, hefty steel structure, poor weight distribution, and outmoded engineering. 2 years prior, GM had effectively reduced its workforce. Ford then introduced the Panther platform. In the hopes that no one would notice, Chrysler pulled the B-body into a new decade. Quality control just vanished. Even by the standards of the 1970s, these vehicles produced electrical gremlins that were notorious. Brake lights were noted by testers to activate interior dome lights. When you apply the brakes, the clocks stop. The headlights fade when you accelerate. Electrical bingo was the game. It was impossible to predict which area of the dashboard might malfunction next. Burn lean. The ideal concept at the wrong moment. Chrysler employed lean burn, a crude emissions control carburetor device. This system's brain is a tiny computer box that is placed directly on the air cleaner lid within an engine compartment that frequently reaches temperatures of 200 degrees or more. Slow cooking is not appreciated by computers. Owners encountered rough starts, surging, and sporadic stopping. The number of complaints from dealers was overwhelming. The suspension was made up as well. Chrysler's torsion bar tooling broke once. They had no money to fix it. Therefore, they just added 2 torsion bars, either on the left or the right, depending on which they had. However, the weight of autos varies from side to side. As a result, the ride quality was terrible and uneven. Why? It is on the list. These vehicles have more than one defect. They represented a struggling car maker. The Roy cars were designed to rival contemporary compact automobiles. Rather, they reminded consumers that Chrysler was just trying to survive. Now let's talk about number 4. Ford Pinto and Mercury Bobcat are number 4. On this list, the Ford Pinto wasn't the worst driver. Despite being one of the most notorious automobiles in U.S. history and not even the most dependable, it became a cultural joke. The vehicle itself was in good condition. To be fair, the Pinto was a low-cost economy vehicle designed for a competitive market. The Pinto stood up very well when compared to competitors like the Chevy Vega and AMC Gremlin, despite the fact that it rusted easily and some of its engines leaked. What went wrong then? The back end is one thing. The gasoline tank may burst and catch fire in some crashes. The worst aspect wasn't even the explosive potential. Ford's internal cost-benefit analysis was the source of the public disclosure, the document that shattered confidence. According to reports, Ford computed expected burn injuries, projected deaths, and the settlement cost per case before comparing that figure to the $11 component cost per Pinto. Ford decided that paying for the settlements was less expensive. The reaction of the people is understandable, a media frenzy. The Pinto came to represent corporate apathy, lawsuits, reports, and national media attention. The harm to Ford's reputation was disastrous, even in cases when the actual mechanical danger was statistically minimal. Why is it on the list? Although it wasn't the worst-built vehicle here, the Pinto was unquestionably one of the most destructive. It altered Americans' perceptions of corporate accountability, safety, and the domestic car industry as a whole. Let's go on to the third. The third is a 1976 Plymouth Valere and Dodge Aspen. The Aspen and Val Airy are at the top of any Mount Rushmore of recalled automobiles. The cherished Dart and Valiant were to be replaced by these. Rather, at that time, they were the most recalled vehicles in U.S. history. It was a good concept. A small car or wagon that might be reasonably priced, effective, cozy, and if necessary, fashioned posh. However, the execution went horribly wrong. Once more, the lean burn occurs. Hard starts, reluctance, and stalling were induced by Chrysler's early electronic carburetor controls. Chrysler recalled 1.3 million cars due to drivability problems by 1977. Several owners reported needing to restart the vehicle while navigating curves. Not the best. There are safety issues everywhere. The seat belts on this vehicle came loose when it decelerated rapidly. Fuel vapor lines that make cut belts were routed close to them. In order to prevent acid from dripping on them, brake lines were installed beneath the battery tray, hood latches that broke when traveling at high speeds, severe corrosion due to missing inner wheelhouses. There were more than one or two issues. It was all of it. Rust, rust, rust. The rusty 1957 lineup was not a lesson Chrysler had learned. Particularly in the northern areas, these vehicles rusted quite quickly. Why is it on the list? In addition to disappointing customers, the Aspen Valere made them completely disenchanted with American automobiles. People remember when an automobile fails in every area. Let's proceed. GMX automobiles from 1980 come in second. Olds Omega, Buick Skylark, Pontiac Phoenix, and Chevy Citation. In the history of American automobiles, this may be the best what could have been tale, a successful launch. In its initial year of sales, the Chevy Citation sold more than 800,000 cars. Customers adored the concept. Modern front-wheel drive package, plenty of internal space, good fuel efficiency, and compact dimensions. It was all that America claimed to desire. And then there was reality. The Aspen Velar was surpassed by the X cars as the most recalled vehicles ever. There are issues with drivability everywhere: stalling, hesitancy, choppy idle, and hot start problems were caused by feedback carburetors. It wasn't until much later that fuel injection was introduced, and even then it was limited to 4 cylinders. Steering rack malfunctions. Because power steering illness was so common, GM ran short of replacement parts all throughout the country. GM was unwilling to admit the brake failure. Particularly in automobiles with manual transmissions, the rear brakes might lock too soon. The NHTSA promoted recalls. GM retaliated. Fixes were hesitant. Owners were incensed, collapsing from the inside out. The window regulators broke, panels inside fell off. Stuck tape drive mechanics. Base models' hubcaps flew off. These vehicles deteriorated more quickly than milk exposed to the sun. Why is it on the list? 95% of the concepts in the X automobiles were correct. However, the final 5% ruined them. Millions of Americans were forced to choose Honda, Toyota, and Nissan as a result. Let's do it well. First place goes to the Pontiac Astra and Chevrolet Vega. The Vega was more than simply a poor vehicle. It marked a shift in culture. It persuaded American consumers that Detroit was unable to produce a compact vehicle on par with the Japanese. A lovely catastrophe. The Vega had a great appearance. The proportions were perfected by the style staff. In essence, it was a scaled-down Camaro. Initially, sales were good. Then, there were fissures. In actuality, rust like you've never seen before. A section of each body shell was never covered because GM's anti-corrosion dip technique had an air pocket in the tank. In some temperatures, such exposed parts corroded in a matter of months. Everything was destroyed by the engine. A small radiator, exposed deck cooling channels, structural flecks around the bores, no cylinder liners, and issues with dissimilar metal expansion were all present in the 2.3L aluminum block. The pistons permanently scored the walls if the automobile overheated, as many did, transforming the engine into an oil-burning catastrophe. The smoke display was exacerbated by the continuous failure of valve stem seals. GM made an effort to resolve it. After internal modifications, they renamed the engine Durablu STs in subsequent years, but the damage was already done. The Vega had come to represent American untrustworthiness. Why? It is the top one. It wasn't merely a mechanical failure for the Vega, it eroded customer trust. For decades, residents of Vegas vowed to avoid little American automobiles. And the name is still a joke today. There you have it then. The 5 vehicles that, for all the wrong reasons, changed the course of American automobile history. Some failed as a result of hurried engineering. Cost-cutting measures caused some to collapse. Additionally, several failed because automakers chose to overlook issues until they gained widespread attention. However, they all have one thing in common. They encouraged consumers to purchase imports. And that transformation permanently altered the American auto industry. What caught you off guard the most? Which catastrophe shall I write about next? Don't forget to subscribe. We will soon be delving further into the history of automobiles.